Bernie Sanders en la profundamente republicana Virginia Occidental, ante una multitud abarrotada, haciendo temblar el recinto y destrozando a Donald Trump, déjame mostrarte lo que ocurrió cuando el senador Bernie Sanders llevó su movimiento Lucha en contra de la oligarquía a Ruby Red, Virginia Occidental. Él dijo: yo pensé que ustedes eran una zona republicana o conservadora, así que mira este clip, por favor.
Thank you. What a great turnout. I was told that West Virginia was a conservative state. Somebody got it wrong.
Una multitud abarrotada, una audiencia energética aclamando al senador Bernie Sanders. Esto es muy bueno de ver. Mira el clip, por favor.
All right, let me cut to the chase. We are living in a moment that is unprecedented in the modern history of this country, and we have got to act in an unprecedented way in response. You know, I've been all over this country in the last number of months, and what I've learned is the American people do not want to live under an oligarchic form of society. The American people and the men and women who put on the uniform of this country fought and died to defend democracy. And we are not going to let Trump take us to an authoritarian society. And the working people of this country understand there is something profoundly wrong when you have a president who gives $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. And then makes massive cuts to Medicaid. 15 million Americans, including 50,000 right here in West Virginia, are going to lose their health care. Cuts to nutrition, literally taking food out of the mouths of hungry kids. Now, we understand that what's going on right now is an acceleration of what's gone on in this country for the last 50 years, and that is the people on top who have never ever had it so good, they're not satisfied. They got a couple of $100 billion, not enough. They want more and more, and they, in their greed. See, these are very religious people. And their religion is greed, and they worship on the altar of money. And they don't care if they throw people off of health insurance. And you know what happens? Let's be frank. Let's throw it out on the table. When you throw 15 million people off of the health care they have, working class people, low income people, you know what happens when people can't go to a doctor when they need to? They die.
Yo considero que es uno de los discursos más fuertes que ha dado Bernie Sanders y me parece excelente. Esto es lo que hay que hacer, ir a estos estados rojos, donde la gente se siente estafada, la gente se siente engañada por todo lo que ha hecho Donald Trump, todas estas mentiras que ha dicho en campaña, y hablar con ellos. Que personas demócratas de alto poder vayan y digan las cosas, le pregunten al pueblo qué opinan. Porque eso falta en este gobierno. El gobierno actual no le importa lo que él quiera y el pueblo se está dando cuenta de esto. Así que los demócratas tienen que aprovechar, ir a estos pueblos y saber qué quiere el pueblo y cumplirlo, o buscar la forma de que se cumpla. Aquí tenemos al senador Bernie Sanders luchando contra los oligarcas en Virginia Occidental. Mira el clip, por favor.
Today, in the richest country in the history of the world, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Anybody here living paycheck to paycheck? All right. So you all know what that is about. What it's about is that you wake up in the morning and you're saying, am I going to be able to pay the rent at the end of the month? Am I going to be able to buy the decent quality food my kid needs? And what happens if somebody in the family gets sick and I have a large deductible? How am I going to pay that? I can't go to the doctor. My mom's sick. She can't afford prescription drugs. What am I going to do? And right now, throughout this country, there are millions of people living with massive amounts of stress. And do you know what happens when you live with stress? That's right. Now here is a fact. I think many of you may know that pathetically, despite all of the money we spend on healthcare in this country, we have a lower life expectancy than other wealthy countries. You all know that? About 4 years younger. But what you don't know is that working class Americans are living 6 years shorter lives than the wealthy. A number of years ago, I did a hearing in the Senate. We had a bunch of doctors up there. And what they were talking about is what's called diseases of despair. You know what that is? And that is that when people live under constant stress, when every single day is a battle for survival, things happen to their minds, things happen to their bodies. They get sicker, physically sicker, mentally as well. And the end result of that is a lot of people in this country die because they're trying to escape life, and they're turning to drugs, they're turning to booze, they're turning to cigarettes, whatever. But the bottom line is that in the richest country in the history of this world, millions of our people are struggling just to survive and are experiencing enormous stress. Now, what our job is to profoundly take on the ideology of the corporate world and the oligarchs. And what our job is to understand, and you're not going to hear too many people talking about it, is that today and into the future, when we see an explosion of technology with AI and robotics, we can fulfill what humanity has been dreaming about for a very long time. We can, in fact, provide a good quality standard of living for every man, woman, and child on this country. But in order to do that, we're going to have to take on the greed of the oligarchs. And we're going to have to tell them that no, it is not acceptable from a moral or economic point of view that one man, Mr. Musk, has more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Now, am I missing something? Or is that totally crazy that one guy has more wealth than the bottom half of households in America? Does anybody think it is vaguely right that the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%? Anybody think it's right that CEOs of large corporations make 350 times what their workers make? So that is what our struggle is about, is to take on the greed of these people and say, you know what? You cannot and will not have it all. But their greed is not only, and sometimes I stop and I think about it. I mean, how much money does anybody need? I mean, really, everybody wants to have money. No great secret about that. But the idea that these guys are prepared to support legislation which takes food away from hungry kids, throws people off of health care, cuts housing, in order what? To give them a massive tax break that they don't need. They have enough money, these guys, to support their family for the next 1,000 years. They don't need any more. But it's not just what's going on in America today is not just massive amounts and unprecedented amounts of income and wealth inequality. That's bad enough. But what these guys are also doing is moving very rapidly to control our political system. The worst decision, I think, or at least one of them, made by the U.S. Supreme Court, and they made a lot of bad decisions, but certainly one of them was this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And the result of that decision is that right now, billionaires have spent many hundreds of millions of dollars in both political parties to support their candidates. Now, I have an idea. I want you to hear me here. Any one of you who wants to kick in a mere $270 million to a presidential candidate, you know what? Hey, you can end up having the most important position in government. Only $270 million. But that's not just Musk helping to elect Trump. One of the reasons, in my view, that Kamala Harris lost this election is she had too many billionaires telling her not to speak up for the working class of this country.
Y por cierto, cabe resaltar que ellos también están en Whirling, Virginia Occidental. Así que quiero que veas este otro clip de Bernie Sanders. Es muy importante, por favor, míralo todo.
Now I know that Trump did very well here in the state of West Virginia. So I want to say a word to folks in West Virginia and in fact across the country who kind of believed what Trump was saying during the campaign. Trump talked a good game, but this is what in fact he has done. Trump did not campaign, not that I heard and I paid attention, that he was going to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. Did you hear him say that during the campaign? Did you hear him talk about $900 billion in tax breaks for large, profitable corporations? Did you hear him talk about throwing 15 million Americans off of Medicaid? Did you hear him campaign on raising health insurance premiums by more than 75% for some 20 million Americans? Did you hear him campaign on taking away free school meals for up to 16 million kids? Did you hear him campaign on doubling or tripling monthly student loan payments for millions of Americans who are already drowning in debt? I don't recall Trump during the campaign talking about shutting down Social Security field offices, making it harder for seniors and people with disabilities to get the benefits that they deserve. And I surely did not hear Trump talking about throwing some 80,000 employees out of the Veterans Administration, which will lower the quality of care our veterans receive. So Trump campaigned on a series of lies. He said he would speak up for the working families. The truth of the matter, he is standing up for his oligarchic buddies. So what do we have to do? What we have got to do, and the reason I'm here in West Virginia, I'm not here just to give a speech. I am here to beg of you to organize around this state, get working class people organized to stand up and fight the fights that have to be fought.
Y para cerrar, finalizando todo, el senador Bernie Sanders explicó cómo en la nación más rica y poderosa de todas, el sistema únicamente estaba funcionando para los multimillonarios y oligarcas. Él dijo, yo entendiera si fuéramos una nación pobre, una nación sin poder, pero no lo somos. ¿Cómo es que cuando se trata de educación? ¿Cómo es que cuando se trata de vivienda? ¿Cómo cuando se trata de costos de alimentos? ¿Cómo cuando se trata de empleos? Cuando se trata cualquiera de estos temas, Estados Unidos está favoreciendo a los multimillonarios y dándole la espalda completamente a todo el pueblo, incluyendo personas que votaron por el presidente electo. Todo esto lo ayudan dándole recortes fiscales, mejoramientos a la paga de impuestos, cuando los multimillonarios ya tienen dinero suficiente como para vivir 100 años sin hacer absolutamente nada. Miren este clip, por favor.
Healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. And we have got to join every other major country on earth in guaranteeing health care to all Americans. And I want you just to think, and again, guys, this is not a radical idea. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border, somehow or another, spending about half as much as we do. They guarantee health care to all people. You end up in a hospital in Canada, you know what the bill is when you leave? It's zero. And that is more or less the case in most wealthy countries. So stand up proudly and make it clear that when anyone who comes before you and says, vote for me, you say, yeah, tell me that you're going to guarantee health care to all, that you have the guts to take on the insurance companies and the drug companies. But it is not just healthcare system which is broken. It's our educational system as well. We got any teachers here? Thank you, teachers. These are our heroines and heroes who every day go to work under very stressful conditions because they love the kids that they're working with, and we thank you very much. But again, in the wealthiest nation on earth, we should have a child care system which cherishes our little ones. And by the way, when we talk about a broken system, while Elon Musk is worth $400 billion, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. So when you hear all of these politicians saying they love America, if you love America, you love the future of America, which is our children. And yet we have a child care system. I don't know how much it costs here in West Virginia, but in my state, people are paying $20,000 to send one kid to child care. Well, if you're making $50,000 a year, how do you afford $20,000? And meanwhile, the teachers are making, 15, 16 bucks an hour. So we need to understand that in a vibrant democracy, which is what I want us to be, in a competitive global economy, which we are in, we need the best educational system in the world. And that means that we appreciate our educators. You know, in Vermont, there are districts in rural areas where people are starting off at $35,000, $40,000 a year teaching. And housing is pretty expensive in Vermont. That's why we have introduced legislation that says every teacher in America earns at least $60,000 a year. There was once a time when proudly the United States led the world in having the best educated population. We had a higher percentage of our people getting college degrees than any other country. That, you should all know, is no longer the case. What we have got to do is to make it clear that we want our young people, all of our young people, regardless of their income, to be able to get the best education that they can. And that means that we've got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. And that we have to make trade schools available to all people to get the training they need to do the work we desperately need. Oh, you have something here? But it's not just education. Once again, point that I'm making is, look, if we were a poor country, I'd come before you and say, look, it really would be great if everybody had health care, if all of our kids could get a decent education. We're a poor country. We can't afford it. Brothers and sisters, we are not a poor country. We're the richest country in the history of the world. And when we talk about a broken system, talk about the major housing crisis that we face in America. We got 800,000 Americans who are homeless. We got 20 million households spending 50% of their limited incomes on housing. If we can spend $1 trillion a year on a bloated military budget, we can build the millions of units of low-income and affordable housing we need. And at a time when wages have been stagnant for decades, at a time when millions of Americans today are working for starvation wages. I remember talking more than once to single moms trying to raise kids on $11, $12 an hour, and you can't do that. We have got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage at least $17 an hour. Brothers and sisters, I know that West Virginia has a history of being one of the great trade union states in America. And we remember the incredible courage of your coal miners and others who stood up against corporate greed. Now, right now, because of what we're seeing in our economy, millions of workers now want to join unions. And in fact, the trade union movement has never been as popular as today as it has been in a very long time. Because workers understand what is obviously true. That if you want decent wages, decent benefits, decent working conditions, you got to join with your brothers and sisters, form a union, and negotiate a decent contract. Now, I know that, you know that, and the bosses know that, and that is why we are seeing massive anti-union, union-busting efforts all across this country. And that's why we've got to pass what's called the PRO Act. And that means that if an employer acts illegally in preventing workers from exercising their constitutional right, there'll be very heavy penalties against that employer. Unbelievably, the United States is one of very few countries in the world that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. Well, let's put that up on the agenda. When a kid gets sick, a mom has a right to stay home with that kid without worrying about being fired. So, brothers and sisters, I am not going to fool you. You understand, as I do, that the oligarchs have enormous, unlimited amounts of wealth. They have enormous power. They control the media. They own the media. And they own many of the places that you work in. But this is... But this is what I believe from the bottom of my heart. If we do not allow Trump and his friends to play the same old demagogic trick of trying to divide us up, oh, you're undocumented, you're black, you're Muslim, you're Jewish, you're this, you're that, we got to all be separate. Our job is to bring our people together around an agenda that works for all of us. So West Virginia, this is a working class state. Let's start electing people who represent the working class, not the billionaires. Thank you all very much.
Como lo dije hace un momento, fue un discurso muy poderoso por parte de Bernie Sanders. Esto pasó en Virginia Occidental y de verdad me enorgullece mucho poder mostrártelo. Y me encantaría que tú mismo me digas en los comentarios qué opinas de esto, qué opinas de este discurso, ya que para mí es muy relevante saber tu opinión sobre ciertos políticos. O si recién lo estás conociendo, también me encantaría que me digas tu opinión. Ya te digo yo que es un gran político y es muy buen orador. Pero bueno, como siempre te digo, para mí lo más importante es tu opinión. Me encantaría que la dejes en los comentarios. Además, está de más repetirlo, si te gusta el contenido de política estadounidense, te gusta estar informado con lo que está pasando realmente en Estados Unidos, te va a encantar suscribirte al canal, ya que subo videos absolutamente todos los días. Mi nombre es José Alvarado, soy economista y estoy comprometido a informarte diariamente. Nos vemos en el siguiente video. Adiós.